NU-13 is a character I regularly dogged on. I was never a big fan of her personality, and her quote-unquote crazy factor never did hit me. That being said, Nu was the very first BlazBlue character I ever saw. Back in early 2010s, I saw this video titled Awesome Video Game Music 134 Awakening to Chaos, which was uploaded by the Art Tucker Flame, now going by Alex Rashawn, who was a favorite YouTuber of mine back in the day. It was simply just Awakening to Chaos track, but it was Nu's design and just overall look to her that caught my eye. This cool silver-haired robot with a badass rock and choir theme. I had to know more about where she was from. If it wasn't for that video, if it wasn't for Nu, I probably wouldn't be into BlazBlues for as long as I have. And that's where it leads into this NU-13 discussion video. Now, I know this wasn't the best lead up to this video, but I just wanted to share a bit of history regarding myself and the character I'll be discussing today, because I feel like it's important, at least to me. Today I'll be talking about Nu and her place in the BlazBlue story, as well as a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff about her character. First, we'll always have to start with the beginning, as I always like to do with these BlazBlue character discussion videos. Now, as a small introduction to the character, Nu is the 13th Prime Field device, and one of the three that were cloned from Ragna Bloodedge's sister, Saya. Now, as I said, Nu was cloned from Saya, just like how Lambda and Noelle Vermilion were, and we all know that Saya's affection for Ragna had carried over to every clone, or at least every individual associated with Saya, even to the point that someone like Izanami can still feel Saya's feelings, despite the state that her body was in at the time. Now, Nu was born in a laboratory where scientists continuously pumped large amounts of ether into her body, a good amount of it going into her eye, where her eye patch would later cover, and that eye patch would function as a ether regulator. Now, Nu is a prime field, so she is immune to ether, which I may or may not bring up later, because honestly, the whole immunity to ether thing doesn't really matter in this case of this video, but I just feel like I need to throw that out there because I'm talking about Nu anyway. Nu would later be put to sleep within the boundary and would then emerge from the cauldron within the 13th hierarchical city of Kagatsuchi whenever the situation would honestly call for it. Now, NU-13 was the final boss of the very first game, BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, though she wasn't a major threat or force throughout the game itself. You would really only meet her at the very end, excluding the wacky time loops via Arcana Heart shenanigans, but the point is, you really wouldn't see Nu throughout the game until like the very end, unless you played her mode, but again, that's like, you really wouldn't see her throughout the whole game, really. You only see her at the very end. Now, as a character, Nu is usually cold and mechanical in her usual robotic nature, but that all changes when our boy Ragna Bloodedge arrives into the scene. Now, as I mentioned before, Nu has Saya's feelings for Ragna, but because the amount of torture and experiments that Nu has gone through, the feelings within Nu have been drastically warped. Now, compared to how Lambda feels for Ragna, where she's a lot more quiet but forward, or how Nu feels, where she has Noelle has a very complicated relationship with Ragna, very complicated affection towards him, Nu is a different beast entirely, like a completely off the spectrum, crazy beast entirely. When encountering Ragna, Nu is far more expressive when he is in her line of sight, spouting out sexual innuendo that should have made the game rated M for mature, but she also acts a lot more girly and is generally a lot, I guess, happier. I could essentially say she's not looking very happy when Ragna's not around, I guess. Nu's love for Ragna is incredibly twisted. You see, if Nu and Ragna fuse or combine together, they will become a black beast and will ultimately destroy the world, forcing Arcana Heart to rewind time and to start anew. Now, Nu believes that by fusing with Ragna to become the Black Beast, it will be the ultimate expression of the quote-unquote love the two of them share between each other. And Nu's repeated fights with Ragna is something that she considers love. Her hyperfixation on Ragna is so great that the one like that she has on her character profile is Ragna, and that her one hobby is thinking about Ragna. Which I'm not shocked about. Nu honestly has nothing better to do on her own, so constantly thinking about Ragna as a hobby isn't all that shocking. Nu doesn't really have very much freedom, and freedom is something I will talk about later in regards of Nu. Throughout many loops, Ragna and Nu would meet. Ragna would get run through by one of Nu's blades, the two would fall into the cauldron, and then eventually become the Black Beast and ruin the world. Now, Nu would remember these events as well, unlike others who would just outright forget, but would feel a sense of familiarity. Nu would even tell Ragna that there is nothing at all he can do, that he can't change anything. And on top of that, on top of being very dangerous and mentally unstable, Nu also has a lifelink with Ragna. Now, a lifelink essentially bonds the lives of two characters together. It means that they can't die without the other. If Nu dies and Ragna lives, Nu will just come back to life and vice versa. This, by all accounts, makes Nu kind of immortal, or essentially just gives her half immortality, I guess, in a sense. And it makes her nearly impossible to kill without an unconventional method out. You essentially have to, create a big outside of the box way to kill Nu. If you really want to kill Nu, you're going to have to kill Ragna alongside of her at the exact same time. Or just do some wacky out of the box method in order to kill her. So, good luck with that. So this is around the time where Noelle Vermilion enters the picture. After countless time loops from Takamagahara, she eventually arrives to fight Nu, and yeah. This is the first time you actually see Nu recognizing Noelle as the 12th Prime field device, and she essentially orders her to self-destruct. Noelle says, no, duh, and the two actually fight each other. Now, Noelle doesn't fare too well against Nu, but luckily Ragna jumps in to save the day. But just like the other previous events, Ragna loses to Nu and is run through by her blades again, falling into the cauldron. However, Noelle would save Ragna this time around before he fell in, leaving a heavily injured Nu to fall in and die alone. So holy shit, Nu is dead, but not really. You see, during the events of BlazBlue Continuum Shift, Kokonoe managed to salvage Nu's soul from the boundary and jam it into Lambda 11. And Kokonoe even went through the process of stealing Nu's memories away, but Nu did say that she was glad to see Ragna one last time before Lambda died from being struck down by Hazama/Yuki Terumi. So holy shit, Nu technically died again. But not really. Remember that lifelink business I talked about earlier? Well, Ragna was obviously still alive after the end of Continuum Shift. Well, he was down in arm from it after his showdown with Mu, but still alive. Which means that Nu couldn't stay dead for long, as so her body began to reconstruct itself from within the boundary, and she was later then salvaged by Hazama and Relius so that she can be rebooted for the plans they were going to come up with. So during the events of BlazBlue Chronophantasma, Nu was used by the evil gang of scum and villainy, who I like to refer to as Hazama/Yuki Terumi, Relius, and Izanami. Now, Nu's main purpose was to observe Noelle within a world that Noelle created known as the Realm. This was the first instance of Nu being used to slowly synchronize with Noelle, and it would happen later in the game as well. There is this large cauldron high in the sky known as the Nemesis Horizon, aka the Amano Iwato, which the Master Unit Amaterasu can be summoned through. Now, the thing is that the Nemesis Horizon can only be opened by one who is recognized as successor of the Azure, aka Noelle Vermilion. Now, Nu was used to sync with Noelle, which would make Nu be recognized as the successor of the Azure by proxy, granting her the power to open the Nemesis Horizon and bring down the Master Unit Amaterasu. Later on in the game, Nu had later fused with Gigant Taki Mikazuchi in order to fully control it, and Ragna, along with Celica, made their way within the core of the Nox Victoris, and that's where they confronted Nu. Now, by actually syncing with Noelle, Nu had gained Noelle's memories, laying on the idea that both Hazama and Noelle were meant to fuse and become a black beast. Nu here is calmer than she's ever really been. She isn't flying off the handle and is actually able to give up a somewhat normal conversation around Ragna. At first, Nu then slips back into her craziness with Ragna saying that he was outright done with this relationship, that he was going to help her, and that he believes that once Nu finally gained the ability to talk to him formally after her syncing with Noelle, that Nu was desperately calling out for Ragna to help her. Nu was kind of used to the same deal of fighting Ragna again and again. Hell, was the only thing that Nu really knew. It's hard to say that without getting confused, but yeah, it was really the only thing that Nu actually knew, constantly fighting with Ragna again and again. But now that Ragna was actually reaching out to her, wanting to quote-unquote save her, Nu did not like that. Oh man, she did not even like that. She even threatened to outright kill him instead of her usual, let's die together, Ragna, and fuse together. Yada yada business she's always talking about. Nu threatened Ragna's life for once instead of just her wanting to die with him, which is just... yeah, it kind of messed her up with Ragna saying that he wanted to help her. Without using the Azure Grimoire like he's always done, Ragna had managed to beat Nu with his own strength alone. And Nu was pretty confused. She pretty much asked him, how did you even get so strong, Ragnar? How did you do that? Ragnar simply says that he didn't even get strong, Nu just got weaker. And, the thing about that is that Nu finally shown some vulnerability for once. Nu finally showed some vulnerability. I mean, her mind probably wasn't in the best. She probably wasn't really in the best mindset when fighting Ragnar after he said he wanted to help her. So it wouldn't make sense that why Nu just wouldn't, be at 100%, and why Ragnar could just straight up steamroll her ass. But anyway, Ragnar decided to save Nu from the Take Mikazuchi, but Nu awakens and stabs Ragnar in the back. So yeah, it's the same deal again. Even after Ragnar decides to help Nu and save her life, he still gets screwed over. Now we can finally move on to BlazBlue Central Fiction, where, like all the playable cast, Nu was thrown into the Embryo with her memories altered, believing that she was still in the days of BlazBlue Calamity Trigger. During Ragnar's Act 1 arcade run, Nu encounters Ragnar and loses to him. Ragnar offers to help her once again, and even Nu has no idea how to respond to all this, as this was essentially the first time that Ragnar had tried to reach out to her in this fashion, and it screws with Nu's perception. Now, unlike the Chronophantasma Extend example, both Ragnar and Nu's memories were screwed with, so technically this was a Calamity Trigger Ragnar offering a handout to Calamity Trigger and Nu if you want to go down that route. But knowing how arcade routes go in these games and how Nine's intervention was handled, it's up in the air if this would have actually really meant anything in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, we just kind of count this one as a non-issue of sorts. As Nu was pulled into the Embryo, she was technically counted as one of the chosen ones by the Master Unit Amaterasu. Nine the Phantom essentially tells all the chosen to go find and beat Izanami so they can claim a piece of the Azure so they can fulfill their desires. Nu's dream was to actually do a complete full-on merge with Ragnar, essentially what she's always been wanting to do. Just essentially just fuse with Ragnar, become the Black Beast, lay waste to the world, typical Nu fashion. Now, most of what Nu does throughout most of Central Fiction is travel around hunting down Nox Nectoris. This time around, Nu is a lot more expressive, is able to speak more outside of her usual cold and mechanical tone, though she's still crazy as ever. Actually, she's pretty much crazier than she's ever been, constantly insulting characters, going on murderous rampages, and trying to track down Ragnar pretty viciously, attempting to mow down anyone in her way. Nu's deteriorating mental state only gets worse and worse as she appears more and more. Hell, Nu completely lost her shit seeing Naoto Kurogane for the first time during an arcade run, because he felt like Ragnar to her, but this is Nu we're talking about here. If anyone would know if someone was quote-unquote faking Ragnar, then Nu of all people would definitely know, considering that Ragnar's always on her mind, and knowing that this Naoto kid was faking Ragnar, yeah, she that didn't sit too well with Nu. That didn't sit too well with her at all. So Nu and Izanami would later sneak into Nine's workshop, where Nu would fight Jubei. After that, Nu would later have to reveal to absorb the core of Take Mikazuchi, and then she was later forcibly gone berserk by Terami, later fighting back Hakumen, who managed to severely damage her. At the end of the story, the last we see of Nu is bedridden in a church, where Lambda and Noelle run as nuns. Nu is clearly in a messed up catatonic state, and that's where she ended up as of the ending of BlazBlue Central Fiction. Everyone loses their memories of Ragnar, and we can assume that it happens to Nu as well, losing the memory of the only person that was ever in the deepest corner of her mind. Nu started the series broken by the world, not given a chance at life. While you have other characters messed up by the BlazBlue world, which is literally nearly all of them, they were messed up by things out of their control, they could at least freely roam the streets and live some kind of semblance at life. Even other Prime fields like Noelle, who'd managed to live a nice childhood and make friends, to Lambda, who, while she didn't have the best start and even died at one point, Lambda came out the end of a series on a happy note, being a nun and a good cook too, because all of Sai's clones are not very good cooks. But Nu? She started off on a rocky road with experiments and the like. She was a lonely girl with a shattered mind, sleeping deep within the boundary all alone. Her only thoughts were of one man who was essentially, these thoughts and feelings were essentially just distorted thoughts and feelings of his freaking sisters, for Christ's sakes. Nu being a clone of Saya automatically gave her a bad start at life. Noelle managed to get lucky and be free. Lambda was thrown out, but at least was saved. There was really no freedom for Nu. stuck under the thumb of Hazma / Yuki Terumi, Relius, and Izanami, forced to be nothing more than a tool. There was no interaction with Nu. Nothing like that. Nu only knew of love through this screwed up perception of her already wrecked mind cobbled together, and that quote-unquote love she was spout on about again and again was toxic and literally destructive. It would literally destroy the world. Nu had died once at the end of BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, and then her soul forcibly jammed to Lambda, where she would technically die again through Lambda. While I'm not a fan of this Nu experiencing Lambda adventures kind of shtick, as it does feel out of left field even while knowing that Nu's soul was in there all this time, you do see Nu at a much more somber position. Like, she really feels that this is the last time that she'll see Ragna again, and that she's finally accepting of that, but she'll always be by his side regardless. You can finally see Nu at a position where just, yeah, this is it. This is the last time I'm going to see Ragna. This is the very last time I'm ever going to see him again. The original game's time loops are a perfect reflection of this. Nu and Ragna would always fight. They would always fall into the cauldron, and would always become the Black Beast, until Noelle interfered. Later on, Nu still wants to merge with Ragna. It's really all she knew. It's both a representation of the love she feels towards Ragna, and the hatred she feels towards the world as a whole. Ragna stepping in to say that he was done with it all it didn't sit too hot with Nu. It messed with her routine. Her not being able to fuse with Ragna and cause havoc on the planet screwed of what little bits of sanity she had held together by string and tape. The fact that Nu was going to say that she was going to outright kill Ragna if he went on further with his whole saving her spiel, it didn't feel right to her. It was even worse that when Ragna held nothing against her at the time. Usually when Ragna and Nu would fight, Ragna would get pissed at Nu for essentially sharing the same face as his sister Saya, but this time Ragna had a much clearer head and a different outlook on the situation. The entire situation was different from what it usually is. There was no intent to kill from Ragna's end. He just wanted to help her. Every time after the events of Calamity Trigger, Nu would be denied by Ragna again and again. She would never fuse with him again to become the Black Beast or essentially get any closer due to her personality. Ragna would try to help. Nu's personality would get in the way. She couldn't get any closer to Ragna because she really couldn't at all. Her mind was too screwed up to even try to reason with Ragna. There was no reasoning to be had. BlazBlue Central Fiction comes around and Nu is different. Nearly all semblance of what tiny bits of sanity she even did have left was out the window. Nu even had a bit more freedom than she did before, even while still being under the control of Izanami. Now, I did mention before that freedom was something that Noelle had. Freedom was something that, even though while Lambda was essentially thrown out and rebooted by Kokonoe, she wasn't still under the thumb of a bunch of scientists, you know. She still was able to do things, you know. She wasn't able to still be under this torturous lifestyle. But Nu? Freedom is something that, in Nu's effed up mental state, is something that she should have never had. And it just goes to show, from all the way from birth to BlazBlue Central Fiction, freedom is something that Nu wasn't ever meant to have. At all. Not freedom to the outside world, and she definitely couldn't be free from her broken mind. Freedom is something that in BlazBlue it's not talked about too much, but it is a thing that, like, the wheel of fate is turning, guys. You guys are stuck in a constant cycle of fate over and over again, but you know, you got Ragna who rebels against that fate and has found his own freedom at the end of the day. You got characters like Yuki Terumi who really only wanted freedom. He was stuck under constantly the thumb of Amaterasu, and when he finally gained his own will, he was wanted to be free. That's really just what some characters really want. To be free from this wacky world of BlazBlue. But Nu, when she finally gets to be free in some state, it's not really freedom at all. Hell, compared to the other games, you know, usually when you see Nu, she's in some position where, hey, she's a place where she's always stationary at, you know? Let's say for BlazBlue Calamity Trigger, Nu would always be at the end of the game at the Sheol Gate. You fight her, you know, you call it a day. BlazBlue Continuum Shift, she wasn't really around, but she was through Lambda. BlazBlue Chronophantasma, you could see her just usually at one place. She, you know, was inside Takumi Kazuchi, so you did see her more out of her bubble. But in BlazBlue Central Fiction, she's moving about. You can see her in various places for essentially the kind of the first time ever. She's been to different places, but like you see her more out and about than you ever have in the series. And then the fact that, you know, now she's essentially free in a state, this is something that she really shouldn't have. Now she's out about, being on this murderous rampage, looking for Ragnar, thinking the only thing that she can do is find Ragnar, fuse with him, merge with him, become the Black Beast, ruin the world. Essentially, Nu hasn't changed. There's nothing to change. I mean, yeah, she's changed with gaining a somewhat, you know, not new personality, but more of a clearer personality instead of being your usual robot self. She's able to talk and shit like that. Hell, she's able to, you know, sync with Noelle and able to talk properly without going off the handle a lot. This is something that Nu wasn't meant to have, and that's a sad thing to think about. She wasn't really meant to have this kind of freedom, you know? And then she kind of just gets wrecked by Hakumen, and now she ends up in the bed in this messed up state that God, if only knows if she's ever going to recover from it, you know? See, the thing about Noelle and Lambda is that they gained a good ending on this, you know? They gained a good ending on this, but can you really consider News a good ending? I mean, she lost the memories of the person she loved the most, the only person she really thought of. She's stuck in this bedridden state after getting wrecked by Hakumen, and now her mind is essentially just ruined as a result. So, is there a recovery for Nu? We don't know. I want to believe there is, because hell, I mean, I don't think Nu is going to end right here, but it's more of a long recovery if she ever does, because now she has to kind of deal with a situation where Ragnar isn't involved in her life. If she even still remembers him. Hell, characters like Rachel have like a small lingering feeling of Ragnar still in her. She doesn't know who Ragnar is exactly, but she still feels that like she knows him. What's the state of Nu? Unlike Rachel, Nu doesn't have a clear state of mind. At least with Rachel, she had an excuse. It's like, hey, I know all these events of the world. I oversee the world. I kind of know where everything's going on, you know, yada, yada. And even she doesn't remember Ragnar after essentially Ragnar just yeeted himself out of existence. Nu, on the other hand, nothing. She really didn't know anything else. I mean, I can't say she only knew Ragnar, but she really didn't know much else, you know? And the only person that gave her peace of mind was Ragnar. Ragnar goes along the way of thinking, like, you know, I hear you, Nu. You know, I can hear you. I see you're calling out for help. I see that you're desperately trying to call out to me. And I want to help you. I mean, I just want to end this right now, because this is just going to keep on going for all eternity. This wheel of fate of sorts is not going to stop until one of us stops. You know, Ragnar and Nu can't die without the other. So there had to be some kind of compromise. Ragnar was willing to compromise and just to end the whole deal. Nu was already just not having it, because this is what she was used to. This was her thing. There was nothing else for her to, you know, like, imagine Nu had a clear state of mind, it probably still would be the same position. She still probably wouldn't want to reconcile with Ragnar, because, I mean, again, the whole concept of her love towards Ragnar was just them fighting each other. I mentioned this many times before already in this video, but that was one thing that Nu could attribute to love, the one positive light in her messed up life, and it wasn't really all that positive. And that's effed up and depressing. And like, in hindsight, that's really depressing, but it's messed up that Nu ended the way she did. You know, there was no helping that. You know, even like, she started off villainous. You know, she started off as a villain. She dies and gets her soul forcibly jammed to Lambda. Lambda wasn't really a villain. You know, I mean, if you want to believe that all of Lambda's actions were just news, if you want to go all the whole route of Lambda's actions being just news as of Continuum Shift, you could definitely see that Nu could have lived a different life had circumstances been different. She could have been a different person had things been different. You know, ultimately is a good point of this. And even though it's just Lambda's, you know, this is literally Lambda, it has nothing to do with Nu, because, you know, Nu's voice only comes through at the very end, and even so, Ragnar doesn't really believe it. Like, this is for Lambda, not really for Nu. It's still, at the end of the day, Nu's still in there. And Ragnar being around Lambda is just one way that Nu could have been around Ragnar without, you know, going off the handle and crazy. And even so, at the end of, like, let's say Alter Memory, and at the end of BlazBlue Continuum Shift, you know, Nu was all like, you know, I was happy I was being around with you, Ragna. And even though I was just going through Lambda's memories, I was able to actually, you know, be with you for once. To not fight with you for once in this fashion, for us to, you know, bond together, even if it was just for a little while. And it's sad to think of that way, you know. Again, I was never a big fan of Nu, but just looking at it through this way made me think that, damn, she really didn't get anything pretty good, you know? Like, Nu's a character. Nu's a character that I gave a lot of shit to. And now even looking through this lens, she's not my favorite character. Honestly, I don't know what to think at this point. I honestly don't know what to think at this point. Just getting through the series again, I'm wondering, like, why did I blindly hate this character again? Then when Nu would meet Ragna, she would kind of fly off. And then the more I think about it, the more I start to think, yeah, this will be funny in any other situation. But you forget that this is coming from a girl with a messed up mind, with a broken mind, that she doesn't really know what she's saying, you know? Doesn't really know. This is the only way she can kind of cope with things and comprehend things in her scrambled up mind of hers. But yeah, I'm going to end this video before it gets a lot sappier than it has any right to be. This is the end of the NU-13 character discussion video, so I will see you all next time. Peace out, everyone, and I hope you have a great day. I am out of here.